Good afternoon, this is Jeff with Sewer Tech Northwest. Today we're at property address 2044 North Killingsworth Street here in Portland. Describe everything as if you're standing in the street facing the front door or front of the house in general. We are on the right side of the home, almost near the rear right corner of it and near the side entry into the house. You've got a clean out here. There's actually another clean out even closer to the road. You'll see there's a 2-inch pipe that comes out of the house. Someone converted that clean out into a drain connection. But you've got another one back here. So 4-inch cast iron. The top of it's been busted off. Not sure what happened or caused that, but anyway. And I have heard water flowing through this thing already once. A toilet flush came blasting through here a second ago. And almost immediately inside of this wall right in front of us here, you can actually see the water right there. The Y-end comes in just past where the clean out access is at. We do come into this on some standing water. We'll take a better look at some of this stuff here on the way out. From the looks of it here, you've got a clean out. That's what I just dropped into. You have to get into it about a foot or so before the actual sewer line comes out of the house and Y's into it. So the significance of that is it doesn't appear, and I'll have a better view of it once I reel the camera out and the line's drained, if that is indeed the case. Right now it's kind of hard to tell, but you can see right here, same exact setup. Y connection coming in on the outside. The good part about that is that whatever is shooting through the line right there, it does not have to traverse through a terribly long belly. It's probably only having to get through maybe a foot of pipe there. But we'll have another look at, we got roots in the line here. And we'll get a better view of the cast iron in general once the pipe is drained off. But root penetration here at the transition to 6-inch concrete, we will locate that at the end. See where that's at. That joint right there looks like it's, unless we've got a wipe in the line, that might be a wipe caught in here. That joint has signs of separation and or being exposed to the ground. You can see the dark moisture staining there. And generally speaking, what that's from is from moisture seeping into the pipe, either through the pipe joint or just straight through the sidewall of the pipe. The concrete here is pretty deteriorated. And that's what ends up happening over time. And then this looks like you may very well have a hole that's formed here in the bottom of the sewer line. My camera is having a hard time getting over the top of that, and it's not the toilet paper that's stopping me, it's whatever's stopping the toilet paper. It looks like you've either got an offset joint here or just a hole in the bottom of the pipe. And there's a bunch of dirt coming through the line just up ahead, right beyond that toilet paper. If you look on the left side of the pipe there, you can see kind of a column of dirt coming down the sidewall of the pipe. So we're going to stop here and go locate. I'm hoping at this point we should be, I think we're going to be in the road at this point past the homeowner's responsibility. Alrighty, located the camera head here. We were just shy of the street. I was hoping we had made it past that point, but right now we're sitting right at the edge of the sidewalk, the edge of the sidewalk that's closest to the street curb. So just a couple feet from the curb at this point. About 4 foot 10 inches deep, and what it looks like you've got going on here now, the line's fully drained. You've got what looks like a concrete debris dam of some kind. It's hard to tell without that toilet paper being gone, and especially without being able to get over the top of this darn thing. It's hard to know for certain, but it could feasibly be. Let's see if we can see a ring around that. Sometimes you can get excess pipe grout. If they put way too much grout in when it's installed, it can come up through the flow line like that, and or over time, grout can be pushed under hydraulic pressure through a joint and up into the flow line. But what it looks like, you've got some kind of broken pipe here. That debris buildup over the top is kind of obscuring our view, but it's a spot that is very clearly open to the ground, and especially made evident by the dirt that coming down the sidewall just past this point here. So you've got about an inch tall ledge there in the flow line for stuff to get hung up on. On top of that, there's a lot of moisture intruding into the line through there. That's why it's so dark and black on the pipe wall. And you have a similar scenario going on here. This is just not quite as advanced as the one that stopped us is. You can see how you've got this protrusion out of the flow line. So, and what seals these pipe joints up is, generally speaking, grout, just a different type of concrete. After, 50, 60, 70 years of constant expansion, contraction, and hydraulic pressure from the ground being saturated with water, it loosens the grout up, and then over time it can force that stuff up through the flow line into the flow line area where it used to otherwise be flush. That's one of the things that can cause this. You can also get broken pipe that just juts upward too. And that spot up there, you can consult a liner company, but I have seen plenty of times in the past where liner companies have just lined right over the top of it. There is some paper product stuck on it, and what's stuck there almost looks more like a wipe than toilet paper. But if you go and do a liner over the top of that thing, you're going to retain a little bit of a lump and a bump in the flow line, but you're going to have pipe walls that are as smooth as glass, and they completely make that insignificant. I'm not seeing much in the way of buildup there, like blockages are occurring, although it's certainly possible to occur. You've got about a 1-inch tall ledge in the flow line to hang things up. By and large, stuff looks like it's getting over the top of it, especially being in 6-inch large diameter pipe like this. So, given that that's the circumstance in very rough, old, worn-out concrete, if you were to do a liner, and you could do the repair however you want, it's going to make that pretty insignificant at that point. It'll just be a very rounded-off lump. It's not going to have any edges or anything like that on it. And then a root penetration here at about 33 feet out. So we're going to try and get this located. I did put a pink X marking down at the edge of the sidewalk. The only part I can't see, you got about another 2 feet or so to go, and you'll be at the face of the curb. Maybe as much as 3 feet. We're about 2 foot 10 inches, 3 feet deep here. We're just to the right of the driveway, adjacent to the little tree that's sitting there. So from this point here at about 32 feet out to the street curb, which is just, again, about 3 feet past where I stopped, I would highly recommend updating the line there. And especially if you want to be able to take advantage, you're going to still have to have a company take a look at the line, make sure there's nothing about that. But I have scoped tons and tons of liners where you got a lump and a bump about every 3 feet where the old pipe joints are, and they amount to absolutely nothing. So the reason you want to try and get on this stuff sooner rather than later, most of the joints in this line are very obviously allowing moisture to seep through. Once that process takes place for long enough, it causes hydro erosion, it caverns out the dirt around the pipe, it erodes the support out under the line, causes settling to occur, so you end up with bellies, offset joints, things like that. It can also cause ground erosion over top the pipe and cause the ground to settle above the sewer line too. Sidewalk settling, things like that. So if you let that stuff progress too far, you'll lose the ability to do a liner, or you just won't get a terribly good result out of it. Right now, everything I've seen up to where we stopped is graded proper still, which is a small miracle considering you've got groundwater seeping through all over the place there. And ideally what you want to do here, we'll see how the rest of this cast iron looks as we come back in. If you can, do a 4 to 6 inch transition piece and line over that transition joint from cast to concrete, you want to do so. Those are the weakest joints in your line to roots, and if that tree remains in place there, you run the risk of a re-intrusion in the future if you don't bolster that pipe joint up. It's very, very close proximity to the tree, and it's also quite a shallow depth. That combination of things, it makes it very easy for roots. And I've seen it many times over the 13 years I've been doing this, where you'll install a new sewer line, and a year or two later, the house sells again, and wham, you got to root right back to the same exact joint again. So you want to try and bolster it up to help prevent that from occurring. And the plus side of liners is they are essentially a jointless pipe. I mean, you've got seams in them, but it's not the same kind of thing as a regular sewer line. So it's an added layer that stuff has to try and make its way through. So what I wanted to see here back where the standing water begins. Yeah, so you can see right there, there's where the Y connection comes into the sewer line. So on that right side there, it almost completely bypasses the standing water. All the standing water that's fighting its way through right there is maybe a 6 inch piece of pipe at its worst is probably causing maybe a quarter to a half inch of standing water. So it's not a it's you know, it's a location where you could theoretically develop a blockage, but it would not be you know, under proper usage scenarios. I think it's a pretty low likelihood that's going to happen. Cast iron's in decent shape there, but I will tell you this: it's a shallow sewer line. It is up until you get to the sidewalk, 100% just under dirt. There is a little bit of a walkway that swings around the front of the house here that you might have to mess with, but by and large, this is mostly very shallow and just under dirt. You know, my 2 cents on this: to do these things right, realistically, especially to help prevent roots from intruding, things like that. Anytime you have old materials meeting with new materials, those joints are that much weaker to root intrusions. This is a good time to consider just simply updating even the cast iron. As the cast iron sits, it's in reasonable condition. It's not super worn out. There's almost no wear and tear or channeling going on the flow line. Sewage is conveying through there with looks like little issue at all. It's just a good time to do it. Like when you go to the mechanic, and while they're, you know, have your engine torn apart, they do your water pump because they're already in there. Whereas to go back and do it a different day just to do the water pump, it's considerably more expensive because you've got to tear everything out again. So I would at least consider that prospect. But the stuff that needs to be dealt with here is the concrete pipe. That's the stuff that's very much at the end of its lifespan. The cast iron still has some life left in it, and that standing water, again, right where that Y comes in, to me, in my opinion, is not significant enough to warrant pulling the pipe up here. But obviously, if you do a full update on this thing, I would try and correct that grade. It makes sense to do it at that point. Recommend rescoping after any repairs, whether you do a dig and it is worth, because of the shallowness of this line, it's worth getting bids on both traditional and trenchless repairs to see how it shakes out. And if you're going to be digging, that's where I would especially consider it, and or even lining. If you're going to line it, it behooves you to go further because there's a setup fee involved with that, and it becomes more cost effective the more distance you go. So I would consider it either way. It's worth doing. But as far as rescoping goes to check the work, when you do a trench read, not beforehand, it's always going to look perfect before the line has weight on top of it. So you want to make sure that the line is buried. You don't want to pour the concrete yet. You want to compact everything, get it ready to pour, make sure it looks good, and then do your concrete pour after that. So you know you're not going to have to doubles. And then you've got about 2 to 3 feet of pipe beyond where I stopped there. I don't see any obvious indications of anything other than, I mean, just worn out concrete beyond that point. Structurally, it's hard to say if you've got anything going on that would prevent a liner from going through there. But I think we're going to be okay here.